So we have been incredibly fortunate at the Coleman Institute to have miraculous partnerships between public and private entities. And we have seen some of the amazing outcomes that have come by just engaging with industry around what are nuances and how can they be applied to this community, and how can we make products and services more accessible for our community. So this is our Innovations Industry Leaders Advancing Inclusive Solutions. And I'm going to allow Dr. Tavares to be able to introduce this wonderful panel, but I want you to listen to some of the things that industry is doing to really push the boundaries of inclusiveness. So with that, I'll hand it over.
Thank you. And is my mic working? Great. So thank you, Shay, and welcome everyone. Today we have, or we're lucky to have, a panel of accessibility champions in some of the large industries that influence our lives and society. We have three individuals here. I'll start actually in the middle. We have Chris Langston.
Is that in the right order? Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. From Facebook, and he's a research manager on the Product Foundation team who joined Facebook to ensure that the user experience and people with disabilities are considered through high-quality research and design. Chris has over 12 years of experience working in academic and industry research focused on disability and accessibility. And today he leads a research team to improve the performance, usability, and accessibility of Facebook. In addition, he supports the Accessibility Engineering Group to help make accessibility a standard procedure across Facebook. And then next we'll have Will Scott from IBM Research. And Will is a software architect and certified IBM Watson application developer in IBM Research, working with the Accessibility Technology and Innovation team. His area of research is developing solutions and assistive technologies, leveraging natural language processing and artificial intelligence. And last but not least, we will have Brian Silver from Oath. And Brian has extensive online advertising experience. In fact, you'll find a very, very long bio in your program, which I'll leave you to read. He's now running the global revenue operations for all of Oath, a Verizon company. But something quite interesting is Brian is also a proud parent to a son with Fragile X. To help other Fragile X families, Brian co-founded the Fly With Me Fund with his wife and has also served as the president of the board of the National Fragile X Foundation. Brian currently serves as a global co-lead for Oath's Neurodiversity Employee Resource Group. And yeah. And I had the pleasure of meeting them. Yeah, exactly. And they had a great day somewhere in Colorado yesterday. So we'll be hearing much more from that team. So actually, before we begin, can you give a warm welcome to our amazing panelists? And I know you each have a presentation to share with us and some of your work to share with us, but I like to sometimes turn things upside down. Usually we start with the presentations and then we have the discussion, and we run out of time to actually have the three of you together to discuss the topics. So what I'd like to do is to ask two very, very quick questions so that you have an opportunity to actually have a conversation about this. Part of standard industry strategy is what has been called the 80-20 rule. And the usual industry strategy or wisdom is for the quickest win, focus on the 80% because they'll require 20% of the effort. The other 20% are going to be difficult, so don't worry about them or deal with them afterwards. This community, of course, represents the 20%, and there has been an emerging wisdom and evidence to show that, in fact, when you work with individuals who have difficulty or who can't use the current products, there's much greater innovation, the product has greater longevity, and it actually works out far better. How do you persuade your companies who have, for many, many years, used the practice of that 80-20 rule and ignoring the 20%? How do you persuade them to change their practice? And any one of you can.
So is my mic on?
I'll hop in there. Usually it comes down to, and speaking frankly, revenue and market share. And compelling and how can I say this, being an advocate to let the stakeholders understand and know that accessible design is not only good for the 20%. It increases, again, market share and revenue in that the number and the population of individuals that can interact with the solutions is increased, and thereby the likelihood of increased market share and revenue. So when you start with that, at least from our discussions, because as I mentioned, or as you mentioned, Gina, that we're with accessibility research. We have this discussion all the time. We're looking to, one, our group influences all of the products that IBM produces. So there's the discussion with designers and developers up front to let them know that they need to make these decisions at the front end rather than the back end, because also, in addition to market share revenue, there's the loss, if you will, that happens when you try to retrofit these technologies downstream. It's so much more time efficient, less costly, and just better design. And everyone knows in the room that there are so many great instances where accessible design has yielded so many other innovations that are just better for the entire, the general population. So starting with the numbers that all these smart business development folks understand, and using that as a tool and a vehicle to communicate with the developers and the stakeholders at large, that's usually how we get inroads, and then we can really start to have that discussion. So that's kind of how it works for us. So.
What he said to start with. Beyond that, I work most frequently with end users, and so I get to hear their stories a lot, and I make sure that I repeat those stories to everybody that I work with, particularly the ones that are really compelling around the limitations that people have using the products that we make. For the way your question was phrased, I would argue that quick wins will build a good product, but they won't build a great one, and most people want to build a great product. So it's never an argument of should we support this 20%. It's usually a question of what does the data tell us about this 20% that's different, and frequently the signals are very, very weak. So in the absence of really strong data about what's happening on the margins, then people kind of regress to the mean. Now, if we can build things that work really well for narrower use cases, frequently this is kind of sanding down some usability issues for everybody else. The classic ones that I always use for people is that having a label on a button as opposed to an image, or an icon and a label, generally speaking, you will see higher metrics with a button designed that way because it tells people what the thing does. Now, a lot of designers like to kind of shrink this or save pixels and things like that, but you can get better engagement out of putting a label on it and make it more accessible at the same time. It's like the most basic thing in the world, but it's a really crystal clear argument for why accessibility can also improve the overall experience of things.
Great. And I have a follow-up question regarding the weak data, but do you want to add anything to this?
Sure. So I actually like the revenue answer and I like the product answer, and so I'll blend them together. And so Oath, which is the combination of Yahoo, AOL, and all of Verizon's digital media services together, serves well over 1 billion customers today. If you think about the 80-20 rule, there are about 1 billion people, which is about the size of China, that have disabilities in the world. And so why wouldn't we take the fact that we want to drive revenue, but at the onset of all the different products and services that we have out in the market today, why wouldn't we want to reach every single person with our own passion that we have towards Yahoo Sports, Yahoo Finance, Makers, HuffPo, et cetera. And so we are very committed as a full organization to make sure that all of our products and services are available to every person on the planet. That's great. And the leadership within your company supports you in this? Yeah, I'm actually, part of my presentation is just to show how committed not only Oath is, but how committed Verizon is in all aspects of both internal and external as it relates to the topic. Wonderful. So you all deal in data, and you were talking about weak data with respect to this community. Many of your services are dependent on people trusting you with their data.
The community here has the most to gain, but also the most to lose in terms of risks with respect to that data. Often they're excluded from corporate data, not intentionally, but because of the fact that they are the 20%, et cetera, and are not included in usual data sets. How are you working to gain the trust and gain the inclusion of data regarding this community?
Okay, so I'll jump in here. There's actually, this is a really big topic within IBM. It stems primarily from the AI initiatives and how we're using the data to inform AI models to make decisions. We want to ensure that the models and the applications that make use of these AI technologies are not excluding certain demographics or coming to decisions they shouldn't based on how they've been trained or indirect biases. So for some folks in the room, you will know there's actually a workshop addressing this specific topic tomorrow at in another IBM site. But what we're doing in terms of IBM, we're actually working to formalize a playbook, if you will, in terms of how do you operate with these data sets? How do you operate with, interact with individuals that you're obtaining this data from in a sensible and a way that will allow them to share their information in an opt-in way, but also de-identify them or to present the information in a way that the models can make use of it without overstepping security or privacy boundaries. So it's a big topic, and it's an ongoing effort within IBM, but it's certainly on our radar, and we are working toward addressing these. So.
Either of you want to add anything?
Yeah, let me see if I can articulate the problem of why this is actually really important to me. One of the challenges we have solving accessibility problems at scale is understanding whether or not we've succeeded at fixing the problem. So if you have, and most of the teams at large companies are going to be really driven by specific product metrics and things like that don't take into account who an individual person might be. But if we can do better like cohort analysis to understand that a specific demographic or population is having a struggle, then we can make an argument for allocating engineering resources and things like that to go and make a change. So what I'm getting at is anecdotes don't drive product changes. If we can show large-scale data and be able to measure that teams are making progress towards solving a problem, then they'll actually pick it up and they'll get after it. But where this becomes really challenging is the privacy issue. So from a research perspective, if I send a survey out and say something like, hey, we have some questions about your screen reader on Facebook and whether or not it works for you, some people will have no problem with that survey. Others will immediately think, how do you know I'm using a screen reader? And I may have just done a broad kind of general population sort of survey. So it's really a question of the kinds of information we have that we can act on. Like, do we know who a population is so that we can recruit for it to actually test our product? Do we know what's happening in the broader ecosystem of the products we build and things like that? So that's kind of what I meant by weak data. And it does run up against this trust issue of how much information do we need to have to build a more accessible product? And I would actually argue that most of the time it's a lot less than people think. I don't want to know anyone's personal health information, ever. Like, we never ask that question very deliberately. But I do want to know what you struggle with. Like, what are the functional limitations that somebody has? What is it you want to do, and what part of it can't you do on your own? If we can then carve that out as a specific signal, something that we can actually measure, then we can really succeed at building something.
Okay, great. And I'm conscious of time. You all have an amazing presentation to show. I would love to follow up perhaps later during the lunchtime or whatever, because of course the issue with large amounts of data is what happens if it's very diverse and everyone is different and there isn't a large homogeneous data set that will persuade someone to change their product.
The only thing I would add, just to tease out the conversation, is there's a difference between privacy evolution and privacy evasion. And I think that what Chris was talking about is correct. I think the large companies that deal with a ton of data, right? Everyone wishes PII would go away. Nobody wants it, right? There's no reason for any of us, with our marketers, our customers, or even our consumers, to actually use it. What we want to use the data for is to evolve our products and services to give you the best experiences we possibly can, the way in which you want to interact with our product and service. And so we could talk about that at length, especially between Yahoo and Facebook, but we'll save that for another time.